the F-14 continued its remarkable run in U.S. service throughout the 1990s and well into the mid-2000s. During Operation Desert Storm, the U.S. Navy saw many of its F-14s relegated to supporting roles, primarily strike escort missions and reconnaissance flybys. It was during Desert Storm that the F-14 suffered its only loss in combat. This loss, however, was partially mitigated by the Tomcat becoming the first fighter in American history to shoot down an enemy helicopter. Following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the F-14 Tomcat led some of the inaugural strikes against al-Qaeda and the Taliban during the opening stages of Operation Enduring Freedom. The U.S. Navy retired the F-14 from active service in September 2006, its final combat mission having occurred 7 months earlier in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Despite the Tomcat's hard-earned reputation, acclaim, and ubiquity, however, there has never been a full combat history of the F-14 covered in one volume. Until now. Tomcat Fury examines the illustrious history of the F-14, discussing the plane's emergence, evolution, and its harrowing combat saga. From the Gulf of Sidra to the skies over Afghanistan, the Tomcat's legacy is one of unparalleled grace and formidability. Chapter 1. Design, Development, and Initial Deployment. In the spring of 1973, the USS Enterprise, America's premier aircraft carrier, began its long journey home from Vietnam. Throughout 8 years of conflict, the Big E had deployed 5 times to the Southeast Pacific, launching more than 12,000 combat sorties. Now, in the wake of the Paris Peace Accords, it seemed that the war in Vietnam had finally come to an end. President Nixon had promised to end the war by achieving a so-called peace with honor. Time, however, would prove him wrong. But for the sailors, pilots, and naval air crews aboard the Enterprise, the more pressing matter was how to reconfigure their ship to accommodate the Navy's newest fighter jet. Indeed, as the Big E docked into the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, she began refitting her flight decks and aviation bays for the Grumman F-14 Tomcat. From the outset of Vietnam, the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II had been the top fighter interceptor for the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. This vaunted 2-seat twin-engine fighter had enjoyed a multifaceted service life, as both an air superiority and ground attack aircraft. Whether escorting bombers, conducting aerial reconnaissance, or engaging in air-to-air combat, the F-4 provided an impressive tour de force from any angle. At more than 5,000 units built, the F-4 Phantom II still holds the record for the largest production run of any American supersonic fighter. Despite its ubiquity, however, the F-4 Phantom had rapidly grown obsolete in the face of modern Soviet aircraft. In the summer of 1967, for example, the Soviets unveiled the new MiG-23 and MiG-25, both of which were purportedly capable of outmaneuvering any jet within the NATO arsenal. In the skies over Vietnam, the F-4, though solidly victorious, had nevertheless shown its vulnerabilities. Indeed, its biggest liability was its weight burden, carrying a gross weight of more than 40,000 pounds. Although its twin General Electric J-79 engines provided ample airspeed, the F-4 was not particularly agile compared to the lighter-weight MiG-17s and MiG-21s. Of seemingly greater concern were the telltale plumes that the J-79 engine emitted during flight. This made the F-4 Phantom easy to detect among enemy aircrews and anti-aircraft personnel, ironic considering the airplane's Phantom nickname. Although stealth technology was still on the horizon, American pilots nevertheless preferred an aircraft whose flight patterns weren't so easily detectable. Fortunately for the seasoned F-4 pilots, a new fighter jet was already under development. Under the auspices of Defense Secretary Robert J. McNamara, the Tactical Fighter Experimental (TFX) program called for a joint service aircraft that would fulfill the operational requirements of the U.S. Navy and Air Force. Accordingly, the Air Force needed a long-range fighter bomber, not dissimilar to the F-100 series of the 1950s, while the Navy needed an agile long-range fighter, capable of air-to-air combat while defending the parent fleet. Thus, on September 1, 1961, McNamara directed there to be a single aircraft for both the Air Force Tactical Mission and the Navy Fleet Air Defense Mission. The General Dynamics Corporation, a powerhouse in the aerospace and defense industries, won the initial bid for their prototype, the F-111B. 7 prototypes were constructed, the first of which took its maiden flight on May 18, 1965. While the airframe was sturdy and its performance sufficient, it nevertheless failed to address the shortcomings of the F-4 Phantom. And more than 75,000